So, okay, fine. It goes, you guys release this amazing thing. That partnership ends. At least maybe it was a record deal. I mean, it was a one record deal or whatever it was. Where do you go next in terms of this management? Even if it's in the future, like...
Oh, man.
Because you were successful with Juliani. I mean, you had a track record.
So here's my other narrative. Because I feel like my life has had two narratives.
Yeah.
I've had a church narrative. I mean, I went to Bible school. I knew I was going to become a pastor at some. That was the desire of my heart back then. And I had this whole media, communication, the arts background. And I always struggled with how do they come together. I always felt like they were clashing. What people don't know is while I was at Africa, through that whole period when I was working with Juliani, I was on staff at Mavuno Downtown. I was actually a staff member of the church. I was a part-time staff, but I was a staff member then. And I was pursuing this thing as well as part of my narrative. And I always struggle with this narrative for how do I merge this thing that I feel, honestly, I don't want to be over spiritualized, but God has put on my heart. But how do I merge it with this thing for church that I just feel, and I always felt conflict. I mean, I remember serving at Mavuno Downtown and the pastor sitting with me and saying, my guy, at some point you must make a choice. You either go right or left, but this thing is destroying you. I mean, I used to get to the office, in my office on Valley Road, and on Monday morning I planned my week. And it was I look back and I was like, such an idiot. I'd say Monday morning is for Africa, Monday afternoon is for Pewahewa, Tuesday morning is for Juliani, Tuesday afternoon is for Kanjii. Wednesday morning is for Mavuno Downtown. That's how I planned my week. And I was getting no progress. Everything was start-stop. Because I start, I stop, I move. Start, I stop, I move. And it reached a place where I just wasn't able to manage. And I had to ask myself, which one do I want to do? And I remember being called in for an interview at a local radio station. They were looking for a station manager. Somehow they called me, I don't know how. And I did an interview. You know when you've done an interview and the first interview, you know you've nailed it.
Yeah.
I completely nailed it. But I went home and something in me was disappointed. And I went home and I was wondering what's wrong. And I realized then, if I take this job, I can't continue with my life. My life has to change. And I knew I'd have to stop working at Mavuno Downtown. That for me was a non-negotiable. I couldn't do that. I called these guys after 2 days and said, thanks, but no thanks. I found another job. Man, they threw the kitchen sink at me for, no, please come back, do a second interview. I was like, no. And it was in this season when I was really, really kind of battling. We're not even talked about groove, it was part of that narrative.
Yeah, we're coming to groove,
And I disconnected from everything industry I was doing. And I put all my heart and all my passion in church. I went to Mavuno, Mavuno Downtown, became a staff member, eventually went to Mavuno. And I stopped managing Juliani. We wound down Africa, we wound down Pewahewa. I wound down everything I was doing except Groove, which was at the time was a very simple engagement. It was a 1-month engagement every year. And I went into church. And that's kind of like, so my path kind of, went in different directions.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, it was the best decision I ever made. It was the most painful thing I've done in my life to date, to shut down Africa. But it was the best decision I ever made. Because what happened to me is I eventually, worked in the church, and I eventually was taken into a role that I really refused initially, head of communications. But in that season, everything, it's like my eyes opened. I fully understood what it is that I'm supposed to be doing and how these two things should do this.
Nice.
I fully began to understand, and my passion began to become this thing for, my primary passion has always been the church.
Yes.
My secondary passion has been media, comms, entertainment, all of that. Very close, more photo finish type second, but I've always known my primary passion is the church. And I began to appreciate this thing for that the church must learn, the church must become better at telling its story, using media, using communications, using the arts for its benefit.
You had seen the power of the arts.
I had seen the power of the arts.
In Juliani and other brands.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you were doing more Africa. You had seen what a million views is all about.
But absolutely, but there were no churches that we worked with that came around that said, whatever you're learning, how do we benefit from it? There was nothing. And I realized I must be the bridge between these two worlds. And So anyway, for that season, I feel like then, I stopped everything. I went into church, and we can come back to that later, but the thing for me now became, the only thing I served in was groove.
Okay, let's rewind a bit and let's talk about your introduction into groove. The first time now you get, and when we keep calling it groove, but it's actually the Groove Awards.
Groove Awards, yeah.
Yes, so how does this whole Groove Awards story start?
So while I'm doing more Africa, I assume, I can't remember. I'm a bit fuzzy because I feel like it's like 12, 13 years ago. Kevin Muley started Groove, and he did the first 2 years of Groove. And it was hard for him. It was very hard for him.
I mean, you've just talked about the industry.
Yeah, it was hard for him for a number of reasons. One was, and I don't want to tell his narrative, he can do that. But the two things from my vantage point is, one is awards are extremely hard to do. If in your organization you say you're doing awards for best employee, people will always feel something. How come? What happened? So they're always hard to do. When you're starting, the initial years are very, very difficult. The scrutiny is very high. But secondly, I think also just financially breaking even with a product that's completely untested. But I'll tell you, if I was wearing a hat, I would take my hat off right now.
It's okay, you can tap that bald head.
I can to Mr. Kevin Muley, because I'll come back, what he created. When I think of who the single most important person in the narrative of the exponential growth of gospel music in Kenya, there are a couple of people in that narrative. I think DJ Mo's definitely is there, and Mamba definitely there. But Kevin Muley for me is at the top of that list for sure. What happens is he does his first 2 years of Groove, and then he has challenges. He's out of the country for a little while. When he comes back, when he's coming back, he calls me. We used to have a lot of conversations and whatnot.
You knew him because you would go for his events?
No, I knew him because whenever I came back from Australia, I came back with like 1,000 CDs.
Oh, and
who did I used to give music to? DJ Mos and a guy called Oscar.
Yes.
And they were working together on Kubamba or something all over or whatnot at the time. So I used to bring Mos all my music, and then I'd bring Kev all my music as well.
Yeah.
So I'd come with music, and I'm just like, where are the DJs? Come take. DJ Josh, I'd give them music. So I had a ton of music that I'd. So I met Kev
in that time,
kind of like in that season. So long and short of it is he eventually asked me to help him, and initially I don't even remember why we didn't work together initially, but then I joined the panel. I joined the Groove Awards panel. That's the one. It's just responsible for who's nominated and do we have good systems for that.
I remember the first time I met Kev, and so when he's just come back and he did a gig at Village Market to announce that he's retiring.
He's retiring.
Yeah. And I was like, well, what do you mean retiring and
Club
Katika
or something like that.
I must say Sikiliza or anyone.
Club Sikiliza.
And I'm like, what do you mean retiring? Dude, I've not even seen you DJ because he was in States.
Kev
but then he's like, I'm about
DJ.
to enter this thing called Groove Awards.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool.
Kev was a sick DJ. He was really, really good. Now, so I kind of joined Groove Awards, and I'm on the panel. For the first Groove? Is it the first one? No. This is now maybe the third or the fourth Groove that I'm joining. Because of the first two that I was not a part of.
Yeah. Now
when I joined, if I tell you the number of people who came and went through that panel, Big Kev was on that panel one time. Big Ted was on that panel one time. Moniki Magaria was on the panel one time. Monica Matiri, who's at Ipsos, was on the panel at one time. This panel was just like Wekatoa. We used to chop and change every year, but somehow, by God's grace, I stayed on the panel. And what was the role of this panel? In fact, let's really dive into that. Yeah. The panel's role is quite simple. Or what was it at that time? It's the same. Okay. The panel's role is very simple. The panel's role is call for submissions. So you call for submissions. Actually, before that is to create the categories and the criteria and all of that for the categories. And then create the nomination and voting system. Call for nominations. Then you'd have a nomination window. People would send in their nominations. The tough job now becomes, in each category we had 6 entrants. And it was, how then do you take 50 and make them 6?
Yeah.
And based on what criteria? And we really struggled in the early years. But I kept researching. Every year I'd be like, we must improve this thing. I was the chair. I became the chair at some point of the panel. And I remember reading about the Grammys one day, and I was like, I know what to do. Well, like what the Grammys do, the Grammys have what they call the Grammy Academy. And it's an academy of, writers and journalists and musicians and producers across the country. And they're the ones who speak into the process. And I realized, okay, we're a panel of 10 guys. We don't know everything in the industry. Now, I had my pulse on the industry completely. I was doing Africa, so I understood what was going on. I was doing Pewayawa. But then it was in that season that we created the Groove Academy. And in the academy, we did the same thing. We were like, we need like 100 guys who are journalists, producers, people who we know we can trust and can be objective. And we ceded that role to them. So
the role of choosing, of selecting the 6 nominees.
That's where even first our role kind of like critically ends. Because now from there it's just systems. Are the systems working? Are people voting? Are we, Are
you allowed to mention some of the people there, or is this a private thing?
In the academy?
Yeah.
Oh, the academy has a ton of people. Any local DJ you can think of, Christian DJ, they're on the academy.
Is a guy like Eric Musioka on the academy?
No, not. I think because he's not predominantly in the gospel world.
Okay.
He's helped us with production. Through the years, but you're talking about people who understand the, and it's not even because it's Christian or not. It's just people who live in the culture of gospel, who understand.
I get it.
This is what's hot. This is what's not at the moment.
Okay.
So, any producer you can think of, we put them in the academy. All radio presenters, radio producers, program controllers, all your DJs, your Sadiqs, your Raf, your Mo, all those guys, they're all in the academy.
Okay.
And the idea is just that you're able to get a good feel for what people think. When the panel will get together, and what will happen is that they'll say, what has the academy said? Here is what the academy has said. So we'd isolate maybe like the top 10 from the academy. Then we'd ask ourselves, do they meet the eligibility criteria?
I get.
Because sometimes a guy nominates a song from 2 years ago because it's hot now.
Yes.
But it's expired in terms of eligibility. So we just sift for eligibility, come up with the 6, and then we meet on the morning of the awards. And on the morning of the awards, then the back end is opened to us. So the guys who run the IT company that does it, they open that, and then our SMS platform as well that Safaricom used to run, open that as well. So that's the first time we're kind of interacting. We're like, okay,
with the results now.
Yeah, with the results.
Yeah.
And then we're able to see. Then the auditors also come. The auditors are always part of that process. So it's almost like when you're opening a tender box.
Yeah.
You want to make sure these are the tenders.
Yes.
So auditors are always there. And then now that's when we say, okay, what have people said? Regardless of what you feel, this is what people have said. That's who goes on the ballot.
Yes.
That's who goes on the envelope. The
winner. That's the winner of.
Yeah. So, but I will say this. I will say, and why I feel like Groove and Kev, for me, have been the single most important accelerator of gospel music is because the ecosystem that Groove created was ridiculous.
It was.
And I didn't even realize it until a couple of years ago when I actually joined the team as a staff member. Here are a couple of things when I talk about ecosystem. First, you've got your artist wing. So Kev created the Groove Camp. There's nowhere in the world you'll take 100, 200 artists out of town for 3 days on your tab for their benefit. Nobody does that. Secular, gospel, anywhere around the world. So we'd go away for 3 days. There's a lot of training that they get. You've gone for Groove Camp.
Yes.
And you were a speaker, I think, last year, the year before. But then there's also a lot of discipleship stuff that we do, prayer and whatnot. And so
just even having everybody in that space at the same time.
Just the sense of unity that you foster is just.
Yeah.
And sometimes we had very difficult conversations for, why aren't you guys playing our music? Why are you guys doing this? Why? And we'd sort them out at Groove Camp. And that was the goal of that thing. Guys would go swimming.
And also, we're not talking about the biggest artists in the country. You had from the biggest to what I hate the word upcoming, but you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's in this space that they get to.
So you develop this thing with the camaraderie with the artists, and you're the one responsible for it. And then, in addition to that, what you're developing groove tours. Now, I didn't understand groove tours until a couple of years ago when I actually went on my first one. And what you're saying is you go to Kakamega Stadium, and the stadium is packed to the rafters. And at the stadium, the guys know. This is when I began to realize this gospel thing is actually pretty big. They know word for word, like 90% of the songs. And you'd leave Kakamega and you go to Eldoret, same thing. You go to Kisumu, same thing. You go to Mombasa, and I began to realize, hey, this thing is big. So Groove created a lot of commercial opportunities for artists because now they were earning out of the tours. But then it allowed them to take their music mashinani proper.
Yeah.
Even in secular, we've never had a body that's been able to do that.
Yep.
Even when you talk about your MCSKs or whatever it is, there's never been a body that's been able to accomplish something like that.
Yeah. Please note, Safaricom Live came after.
It came after, that's true.
Yes.
It came after.
Yeah.
Actually, Groove Tour really was the platform.
Yep.
Was the platform for that. And then obviously you've got the awards. The awards is nationally televised across the country. Again, even Kisima, in our best days, that never happened.
Yep.
And so everyone knows that this thing is going on. Now you've got billboards and whatnot across the country. And I really must big up Safaricom because I don't even think they know what they have done for this industry. I think they know, but I don't think they know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because their input has been just phenomenal, through the years. And then you've got your Groove Party at the end of the day. This now is for your young guys. It's for your teens and whatnot. And you created this entire ecosystem that's feeding everybody. And everybody is benefiting off of this thing. We met up with a gentleman from Dove Awards, the GMAs. He came to Kenya a couple of years ago and kind of hung out with our team and whatnot. And I kid you, his name is Curtis. I kid you, what he told us, for me, resonated so strongly. He said to us, please don't benchmark against us. That for me was interesting because they are like the Grammys of gospel music, but I guess he was like, he said to us clearly, the only place you can benchmark against us is production. We'll beat you in terms of production, but we don't have the reach that you guys have. We don't have the national appeal that you guys have. Peter Dara told me something very interesting one time. He said to me, he went to Nashville for the Doves.
Yes, he did.
And he says how it was the biggest, glitziest, glamorous, most wonderful event he had gone for. Even the Americans were like, this thing is the best thing we've gone for. He said he went back to, I don't know if he was in a hotel room or staying with people, and he said, let me look on the news to see what they're saying. Nothing. And we're talking about the local news in Nashville, not even the national news. The local news in Nashville, it didn't even make the news. You have to go looking in the Christian spaces
for it to see it.
What that means is, here we listen to Kirk Franklin or we listen to Dietrich Haddon, however it is, and think, they are massive. In the US, they're not. You go to places someone says, I've never heard of Israel Newton. I've got no clue who that is. Hillsong, what is that? Here, let me ask you, Nikona. If you took that thing anywhere in Kenya, who doesn't know it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you take some of these jams to Masi Masika,
Insane.
It's insane. I always say Masi Masika's next song could be the ringtone of the country. There'll be a house help in Lamu tomorrow.
Yep.
It'll be her ringtone. And we began to understand that this thing, in fact, I remember one time I met Eric Wainaina after a groove party, and that year there was groove party and there was TSO and there was another gig happening. I don't know what it was. And he was with sheep and he asked me, Kuria, how do you guys do this thing? Because he was like, how do you guys fill up the stadium? Like, and all of you have filled up stadiums. Because it's like secular can't do that. In fact, there's an artist, I don't want to mention his name, who had just had his launch at KICC. Big name artist. Complete flop. December 31st. Complete and utter flop. But gospel was just like, and it really was, you know, golden days of gospel. But groove really did help create that ecosystem.
Yeah.
That I think just enabled artists to flourish, for them to be known. Winning an award was, and then the other thing they did is now they created regional categories.
In fact, yes.
Oh man, now when you talk Mashinani, that opened up this thing. It's like it opened it up into Mashinani completely.
Do you know, I would see the love with which people from outside Nairobi, first of all, it's a big deal, even just for the main artists in Nairobi to have won it. But I mean, I would be like, okay, you guys, you've traveled all the way from this thing with your famo to come for this award. Sure.
There was a year when we had to postpone Groove by a couple of days because there was like a Gormaya game or something going on at the same time at the venue.
Yeah.
In different spaces, but we're just like security-wise, it just didn't work. Yeah? And guys from Mashinani have come and they stay for 3 days. They find a place, a hotel or whatnot, they stay and they wait for this thing. Guys from the different counties. And
in fact, Kuria, I love that we're talking about the impact that Groove has done. I was the Groove Award ambassador, so I have an understanding of what the vision that they were trying to do, or even just the madness of the workings. And one of the things that I had the joy of doing was traveling to take Groove now to other countries. Yeah. So I'd go to Uganda, connect with people there, then Kev comes and meets them. Now, it was obsessive how people want to be a part of Groove in these other countries.
Completely.
So now, you from an African perspective, it's all nice that you've given us an example of the Dove Awards, but from an African perspective, where would you see Groove Awards?
Oh man, let me say first, and let me affirm what you've said. Everywhere I traveled in Africa, people would always ask me a couple of questions. One of them is, how did you guys do this gospel thing? Like, how did you grow it? Like, how is it at the place where Kisima Awards can have 90% of the guys are gospel artists winning, yeah? Or your Skiza Tunes, a ton of guys are your Angela Tibalonzas and your people like that who are, Eunice Njeris who are at the top of the list. And then I'd be like, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what it is that we did. I can tell you, I mentioned Kev, but Mose is the other guy. And you see, let me tell you what Mose did and why I think Mose is another guy you just say, my guy, hats off to this guy, saluti, kabisa. Mose was completely committed to high school missions.
Yep.
Completely. I mean, you did those missions. I went on some of those missions with them. Do you know what that did? It created what that meant
underground beast.
An underground beast.
That mainstream media was clueless about.
Completely, and secular artists were clueless about. We were allowed access into schools. What that meant is the moment this guy came out, who were they looking for? BMF.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Whose music were they looking forward to?
That is insane.
And Mose and Jugush and those guys, they created the underground thing.
Let me show you how right you are.
Made gospel pop.
Just to enforce on that thing, the Kisima that I won was the time I became a gospel artist. And all these people were asking, and all these people in Kisima were asking, who on earth is Esther? Who is Esther?
Esther the Light.
Now, the Papa San event that you're talking about was something called Soul Nairobi.
Soul Nairobi,
Where me, Mose, Saramitaru, and all those guys, we went to 3 high schools every single day. Kiki and Kiki. So I understand.
Kiki was phenomenal.
Yes. So I understand when you say, but that time you don't know when the movement through high schools.
Oh man,
because this is before mobile phones, before all of this other stuff.
Absolutely. And I think part of the tragedy today is I see these guys do high school ministry is that artists don't go with them. Or many times a lot of artists don't go with them, which I think is a tragedy, yeah? Because I just feel you guys don't realize that tomorrow these guys are going to finish high school. You're the #1 guy on their ringtone, on their, skeezer tunes, at your gigs. But Kenya most created that thing. So the first question people ask me is, how did you do it? I think, there are many different reasons, and I'm not saying I know everything, but I will say from my vantage point, I think most on the work that K-Crew did, and then I think Groove kind of just amplified the thing that was that was going on. Because I'll tell you, mainstream media didn't support us. We supported ourselves. This is the pulled itself up from its bootstraps completely. Mainstream, even Christian media. Christian media didn't even play local music. I worked at Family FM. They never saw the need to play local music. I don't know if they do now. I hope they do. You're talking about Hope FM did. Hope FM, I will say, played quite a bit of local music, but they were a worship station, so they had their slant towards that. Yes. But we were growing in pop. That's the Christian pop music is what is where really we were growing. Eh? So the first thing about Africa is people always ask me, and I say these are the things. But the second thing for me is people always saying, "Can you bring this thing here?" So because you've been to Rwanda. Groove has been in Rwanda now. I think this will be the 6th year. 6th or 7th year, I lose track in Rwanda. But the goal has always been, how do you make this thing an Africa-wide thing? How do you make it? The challenge with Africa, I'll tell you, and what are the secular awards called? The secular African awards called? Happened in Nigeria, happened in
the MTV. No, the
MTV awards. There was Channel O awards.
Oh, it was Kora
awards.
Kora awards.
I'll tell you a big challenge with Africa, just from my vantage point. Again, I could be 1,000% off. But Africa is not homogeneous. And what that means is we are very different from one part of the continent to the other. So to have an African artist, it's very difficult to say. Like now, for instance, I went to Addis. There are some phenomenal artists there. How will the guy from Addis compete with the guy from Namibia? How do you measure best song Africa? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then in Addis, they don't have the internet penetration of, say, South Africa. Or even an industry as developed with record labels and whatnot. So the playing field is completely
even
skewed.
Just language.
Even just language, absolutely.
Francophone countries.
Absolutely.
Fact, let's talk about Rwanda.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things you've experienced in
Rwanda? Has been it's been a fantastic journey, but it's been a journey with just challenges and ups and downs. You have a language situation in Rwanda because they speak Kinyarwanda. So I was invited a couple of years ago to speak at an artist conference in Rwanda, and so the Serena, and they put me up in the hotel, and I come down to go straight onto stage. I was really tired, so now no one tells me these are Kinyarwanda speakers, and that I require a translator. Yeah. But they tell me that at the end of my presentation, because this chick comes on and translates my whole presentation after me for another 15 minutes. I'm like, I didn't know, nobody knew what I was saying. But you've got an instant language barrier.
Keep us song of the year. Yes,
Ganashimira na all gospel today. Yeah. Gashimira ni Kisima. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
TV show of the year. Power of
Imana ibahumugisha turanezerewe dushimiye abayobozi ba Groove Award. Imana ibahumugisha murakoze. Hallelujah. 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 Two one. Yeah. Ay bumamo. Murekera ngo. Hallelujah. Ebi nta wundi rero ubikora. Hari abantu Imana barahagurukishije batanabizi ubwo nanjye nabigendeyemo Uwiteka yabicyubahira.
Or rather, the new artist of the year is Arsene to
sinzi ibyo navuga gusa uwo mwami muhaye icyubahiro cyose kuko niwe wampaye impano kandi niwe nkorera.
And then you also have a barrier for a cultural barrier because they are much more conservative as a culture than your Kenyan culture. So hip hop, man, it's like a foreign thing. DJs, you have to begin to speak a different language. Now,
That's an advantage though, because you can see where they can go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there are things where you can develop music videos and things like that you can really help them develop. But my point is, if you're making an Africa-wide thing, how do you do DJ of the year? You know, I was in Addis 2 years ago, last year, and a guy called Kemi, fantastic hip hop artist, was launching. Was it Kemi? No, it wasn't Kemi. I forget what they're called. TC. They are launching the first Christian hip hop album in Ethiopia's history. They're called Cross Connect or Cross Concept. They were launching the very first.
This is last year.
So you see, part of the challenge also is that Kenya has gone many steps ahead of many other places. To do an Africa thing is just, there are many, I'm not saying it's impossible, but there are many things you must consider and many challenges. But Rwanda has been a fantastic kind of like just tilling ground. To try and figure, you also figure out the corporate environment of the place that you're going to try and figure out.
Because we've got to work with the finances.
You have to work with, everything has to make sense. So,
not to end this groove conversation, but just to sort of again enforce on what you're saying. Been privileged to have conversations with the Pompies, the Abel Chungos, the Mag 44s. They coming to Kenya is, it's bucket list things. You get, and that penetration. But also, let me be honest, if it wasn't for Groove, some of the penetration that they have.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Groove has actually helped African gospel artists penetrate here.
Absolutely.
That, of course, on the internet. But
I think about Ada in Nigeria, for instance. It really is, a lot of the work that Groove has done that has helped her kind of like, when she won best West African artist. The next year she came and did a gig here. And her gig had all our top names were opening for her, which I found interesting. But
that's funny.
You know,
And,
so yeah.
and even okay, again within the groove. Now let's sort of talk about your role in groove, because again there's this thing that you've done for the industry for me, which is the new groove, which is Praise Fest. The introduction of gospel artists from across the world. Very weird, even some of them from. Let's talk about Praise Fest and what Praise Fest has done for here. Because I was at Travis Green, and Travis Green was. I was just like, yo, I can't even find a place to sit.
So Praise Fest was